Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So tonight, I want to discuss a topic that I bring up from time to time. I cover these stories I've covered them on the blackbraziltoday.com blog, numerous stories. And I report on these stories to, just to give you an idea of how frequent these situations are. Whatever the case may be, there's numerous topics I can approach on the blog and now the YouTube channel. And, a lot of times I'll present a story that's completely new, that's never happened before. But other times you'll see numerous stories when you do a search on the YouTube channel or the blackbraziltoday.com blog, and you'll see, why does these type of stories keep popping up? And it's not that I necessarily like reporting on these stories, but somebody has to talk about this. It strikes me as, why Brazil? That's the only question that I can ask. Okay, so touching on this topic again, woman held in a situation analogous to slavery for 44 years in Bahia will receive 500,000 reais in compensation. Okay, headline says a lot. Let's get into the details. Before I do, like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, click on the notification bell. So let's get into this story and get a few more details about, a situation that's all too common in Brazil these days. So what I always have to talk about when I talk about this type of story, because this story is just a few days old, Brazil's long history of institutional slavery. Okay. As we've all heard for a long time now that, Brazil imported the most enslaved Africans of any country in the Americas. Brazil, the slave era started somewhere in the first half of the 1500s. It's estimated somewhere between 4 and 5 million enslaved Africans were brought to Brazil. And, just because of Brazil's long history, talking about 350 years of institutional slavery and, servitude, the Black body today in 2024 is still associated with slavery, is still associated with servitude. So this is why the society as a whole continues to reject Black men and women when they ascend socially, when they are able to buy nice cars, when they're able to live in nice neighborhoods, send their kids to nice universities. People looking like, it's almost like, it's like a slap in the face or something. It's like an offense. Like, how can these Black people get what I have? It's always a thing of, there's a saying in Brazil that says, volta pra senzala, which means go back to the slave house. And Black Brazilians hear this type of thing every day. Here it is, what is this? 138 years after the official abolition of slavery in Brazil. And there's still this connotation with the Black body that's connected to slavery. So this is what we say, the hierarchy in Brazil, according to what somebody looks like. If a person has a phenotype that says you have some African ancestry, then it gives me the right to treat you in a certain way. Okay. I've mentioned, if you go to blackbraziltoday.com, punch in the word slavery in the search box, you'll get a whole lot of stories about the slavery era in Brazil, and also the type of jokes that Brazilians make on a daily basis that connect the Black body to slavery. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm not even going to touch on it tonight. I mean, feel free to go to the blog and use the search engine to find some of these stories. It's insane, and it speaks on the psychology that's in the minds of the population as a whole. The story I'm presenting today, it's nothing new, unfortunately. These things, it seems like every year there's a report that comes out of how many people were rescued from working in slave-like conditions. It happens every year. There's always some report. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But first, I want to talk about the story. This is just a lot of people have seen this map. This is specifically the routes of Africans that were brought to specifically Brazil. Okay. In the numbers, according to, we'll say official documents, 12 million Africans were brought over to the New World, South America, North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. It is said that 500,000 went to North America. About a little less than 400,000 came specifically to the land that will become the United States. Whereas look at Brazil, it says 5.5 million. Okay. In the Caribbean, there were 6 million. So you see, Brazil imported more Africans, like 10 times more than North America as a whole, and probably 12, 13 times more than the United States as a whole. I say, a lot of us come up and we learn about the slave era, in the United States, and nobody really talks about how slavery happened in other parts of the Americas. Okay. Now, I do want to mention more and more reports are coming out that are actually questioning this narrative that says, well, there's a lot of evidence out there that suggests that Africans were already in the lands that we call the Americas before the slave trade. That's a whole nother topic. Understand that these are just official numbers, but as more research comes out, definitely one day I might have to change my view on this whole thing of the slave trade, because there's so much more information that's coming out, things to make things make a little bit more sense. And also, it speaks not only of the position of how globally people look at Africans as if, Africans and their descendants are somehow inferior, but linking the great African past to numerous countries over in the African continent, as well as, I talked about ancient Egypt in a couple videos back, and the idea that Africans crossed the Atlantic on their own and arrived before Europeans did, that changes the narrative for me, but that's not what I'm here to talk about tonight. I want to get back into the story. Woman held in situation analogous to slavery for 44 years in the northeastern state of Bahia will receive $500,000 in compensation. The story is by Fernanda Amorgivino. Story gets pretty gross. I'm going to just, go over it. Then I'm going to go to some other articles that just talk about today's topic. So according to the Bahia Labor Prosecutor's Office, a 50-year-old woman identified by the fictitious name of Maria was kept in a situation analogous to slavery for 44 years in the city of Porto Seguro, located in the extreme south of the state of Bahia, and she will receive $500,000 in compensation. The information was released last Monday, the 23rd. Now, I want to talk about, just to put this in context, a situation analogous to slavery is just saying that, okay, she wasn't enslaved like the way slavery was institutionalized in Brazil for 350 years, but the forced labor and the free labor, this is how they term that. It's like, okay, it's not officially slavery, but it's similar to slavery. She's working around the clock. She's not getting paid. And she was kept in this situation for, what did it say, 44 years. So since she was 6 years old. According to the ministry, at the age of 6, Maria arrived to work as a maid in the home of Eni Peluso Lodeiro, her employer who died last year, and his children Joaquin Neri Neto and Maísa Lodeiro Neri Santos. She didn't have a birth certificate, so there's no information about her origins. It is suspected that she came from the African continent and that she didn't speak Portuguese when she arrived to work. Okay, this is what the prosecutor's office says. This is intriguing. I would like to know more about this. They're assuming that this girl she came over from Africa. I mean, we do know that a lot of Africans and people from the Caribbean, South America are migrating to Brazil. So it is possible. We've seen stories of Africans landing in Brazil. They came over in precarious situations on like the basements of some ships. So it's not impossible. Obviously Brazil has a relationship with Africa that goes back to the 1500s because of the importation of Africans for the slave era, right? But I would like to know more. The one thing I want to point out is that when we find people in Brazil working in conditions analogous to slavery, they're usually Black women. That's one thing that I always notice. I'm going to talk a little bit about that more in the future here, in a couple of minutes. Combating work analogous to slavery. This is a big thing in Brazil. Every year they're releasing people who've been found working in slave conditions. Likewise, at the end of last month, with the victim's participation, the prosecutor's office of Bahia and the representatives of the employer's estate and 2 children reached an agreement, compensation of R$500,000, which must be paid by February of 2025. The document was signed by everyone and ratified by the labor court. However, the employers did not acknowledge fault in this situation. Really? Okay. So the father who took advantage of this woman, and obviously the family the whole family exploited this woman's labor. Okay, the father died, but obviously these the children of the guy who was responsible for her obviously took part in exploiting her labor as well. Maria was thrown out of her home and had her uterus removed without her consent, says her lawyer. That's why I said this is really kind of a gruesome story when you think about this. Not only is she working as a slave in these people's houses, these people, the family's house, they had her uterus removed. What's up with that? In an interview with G1, it's a global associated website. The victim's lawyer, Martha Gibajos, said that after her mother's death, Joaquin Neri began to scream and curse at Maria. According to her, the victim came to be seen as a burden that any Peluso's children didn't want to carry. That's why they threw her out of the house. So my question is, because they're making it sound like, okay, she was a burden to the household. We don't want her. They threw her out of the house after exploiting, her labor was being exploited for 44 years since she was the age of 6. My question is, when the father died, did they continue to exploit this woman as a slave in their home, or did they not want to deal with her and just put her out in the streets? I'm not sure. I'm going to follow up with this story to get some more information. In addition, the lawyer reported that Maria had her uterus removed without permission. At the time, she had myoma, a benign tumor that forms in the uterus and affects around 80% of the women of childbearing age, according to the Brazilian Federation of Gynecology and Obstetrics Associations. There was no immediate diagnosis of hysterectomy, but they took the opportunity to castrate her, said the woman's lawyer. Still, according to the lawyer, Joaquin Neri also tried to register Maria to receive social benefits such as Bolsa Familia and sickness benefit. Now, Bolsa Familia is a program set up by the Brazilian government to provide funds and maybe food to, families that are in need, So I don't know, it's kind of like almost like a welfare type of payment. It's not a lot of money, but it helps people get by. These requests drew the attention of social services, leading the team from the Social Assistance Reference Center to visit Maria's home to forward the request for inclusion in Cadastro Único para Programas Sociais, CAD Único, you would say. It was after this visit that Maria's condition began to be revealed, said the ministry. A story like that of many other Brazilians, says the prosecutor's office. I can definitely verify this. I've been covering stories like this for years. A story that's like many other Brazilians. So whether she is a recent, someone who came over from Africa recently, or she is actually Brazilian, this is a very common story of Brazilians working in conditions analogous to slavery. According to the Bahia Labor Prosecutor's Office, this story began in a similar way to that of many other Brazilians. When they were still children, they were handed over to wealthy families to work as domestic servants and remained in a situation analogous to slavery for decades. I wanted to go back and just talk about real quick, because I talked about the CAD Único, the Cadastro Único para Social Programs, or Programas Sociais. So what that is, it is an instrument of the collection of data and information with the objective of identifying all the families of low rent existing in the country for the means of inclusion in social assistance program and redistribution of, financial resources. Okay, so that's the program that this is all about, collecting data for people to see if they can help them with social assistance. According to the organization, Maria didn't go to school. She didn't make friends. She didn't have romantic relationships, but her fate had a positive outcome. The agreement will guarantee a chance for the future of those whose past has been erased, said the ministry. Okay. Again, just, crazy story. All I can ask is, why Brazil? Okay. So let's look at a few things that I want to throw in as context. This is an article I did from 2015, and I said, along with the jokes that Brazilians make about slavery every day, comments on social network pages show that Brazil still has a nostalgic feeling about slavery, says a researcher. Okay, people still make jokes about this, like, hey, if this was 200 years ago, I'd have my way with you. A lot of people, you'll have white men in Brazil who say these types of things to black women. Harken back to the exploitation of black women during the slave era, right? Nothing to joke about. These just are some stories that I did on the blog, Slavery in 2020, People Working in Conditions Analogous to Slavery. Slavery ended. This was as of 2013, 125 years since the abolition of slavery, but today 8 of 10 people working in conditions analogous to slavery are of African ancestry. 89-year-old black woman subjected to slavery in the city of Santos for 50 years. This was a big story, and it's actually something I'm going to talk a little bit about. This made big headlines back in 2021. It was all over the news. It was on the news journals. Preta Hara is a rapper who wrote a book about her experiences as a domestic servant, domestic, maid, and she collected stories of hundreds of women who were made to feel like slaves working in the homes of these elite, mostly white families. Okay, the jokes. Okay, here's a motel that's themed after slavery. A motel senzala, which means slave house, or slave quarters. In southern Brazil, Porto Alegre is the capital city of Rio Grande do Sul, and you come in and pay your money, and you can be, do what you do in a motel and just have whips and chains and a cage inside to, if you want to relive or just fantasize about what it was like in the slavery era. So I don't know if this motel still exists, but this is from 2018. Elderly woman enslaved for 8 years was rescued in the state of Minas Gerais. Is slavery extinct or it is not? Okay, it's not institutional anymore, but you're hearing about this every year. Look at all of these stories. Woman maintained in a condition analogous to slavery in Bahia. This is the story that I just reported. This from 2 days ago. She had her uterus removed. This is from August 14th of this year. A woman was rescued after 40 years in work analogous to slavery. This is from March of this year. This is from July of this year. This woman, let me see. Okay, these people became defendants in a case when they were accused of keeping a woman in a situation analogous to slavery. A woman is rescued after 72 years of, work analogous to slavery. I mean, it goes on and on. As I've said, I've covered this story for a number of years now. These are just some of the faces of some of the women. This is the 70. Okay, this woman was held in slavery for 72 years. You'll notice that all of these people, what do they all have in common? They're all Black women. Okay, this is the big story that I was telling you about from 2021. I could do, if I was, it's unfortunate, but I could actually do a whole blog talking about people working in slave conditions in Brazil today. More pictures. Some of these are the same pictures, of course. All I can ask is why Brazil? The Black people are 84% of those rescued in work analogous to slavery in Brazil. And let me see. In 2022, 500 workers were rescued in conditions analogous to slavery. 84% of them declared themselves Black, probably Black or brown. Brazil rescued 3,100 workers enslaved in 2023. This is from 2019. Black people are 82% of those rescued from slave conditions in Brazil. It goes on and on. I mean, I can see, this is just the first page of Google. It goes on and on. I have I have numerous stories on the blog that talks about this. 2024, July 22nd in Rio, 42 people. Let me see if I can get the whole, let me see. 42 people in conditions analogous to slavery are rescued in a center of rehabilitation. Okay, 2,500 victims in 2022. Yeah. Let me see. Federal operation rescues 593 people submitted to slave work. Okay. This was the big story that I was telling you about. This is from 20. Okay. So the original, it was a follow-up story in 2021, but this is the original story of the woman who was working in slavery for 38 years. This story originally came out in December of 2020. This is a story. She was being enslaved by these two different college professors. This was a crazy story. Just the pain on this woman's face of being enslaved for 38 years. Her story was featured on what was it? Fantástico. It's a Sunday evening news journal that comes on in Brazil, somewhat similar to 60 Minutes. If it wasn't Fantástico, it might have been the one that comes on the Record television network. What is the name of that one? I think it's Domingo Espetacular. Both of these news journals are kind of like a Brazilian type of 60 Minutes. They do stories once a week on Sundays. After exploiting Madalena, the name of the Black woman, Maria das Graças donated her to Dalton Cesar Milagres Higuera. Both are university professors. She donated the woman to another college professor, and he continued her in slave labor. Wow. Okay, elderly woman enslaved for 8 years was rescued in a state of Minas Gerais. Is slavery extinct? Okay, so this is a carnival procession, I think from might have been somewhere between 2021 and 2023. They just depicted a theme of slavery during this particular, I think they won that particular samba school, the Paraíso do Tuiuti Samba School Carnival. They performed this hark back to the slavery era. Okay, so anyway, I just wanted to share that to put this into context. Like this isn't something new that's going on in Brazil. Unfortunately, every year they're releasing hundreds, if not thousands, of people who are being found working in slave labor. Why Brazil? Slavery ended in 1888. Why is this still going on? Maybe I'll talk about that in another video. But for now, what did you think about this video? Definitely drop a comment in the comment section. Like this video, share this video, consider subscribing to the channel. Click on the notification bell so that you know when I put up another video. And with that said, I'm going to end this video here and request that you all come back, check out the next video that I post here at Black Brazil Today.